10 before the hour. Remember the Supreme Court ruling on December 12th, I think it was December 12th, 2000, that said George W. Bush would be grievously injured if the vote counting were to continue in the state of Florida. And they based this on the idea that the different counties in Florida had different ways of counting votes. This county said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This county said 5, 10, 15. This county used punch cards. This county didn't use punch. So the Supreme Court, in this brilliant ruling on the part of the capitalist thugs who took over the country on that date, the Supreme Court said, well, this is not this is a violation of what, equal protection or something, because they count votes differently. And the Supreme Court, when the counties did, and when the Supreme Court ruled this and overturned a ruling by the Florida Supreme Court, the Florida Supreme Court said, hog crap, keep counting the votes. The U.S. Supreme Court, 5 conservative members said, no, stop the vote counting. Okay. So the vote counting stopped, and we had 8-year reign of terror of Bush and his puppet master Cheney. The Supreme Court, in that ruling, tried to say that the ruling that they were issuing was not to be used as precedent. First time in the history of the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court says, well, we're going to rule this way, but you can't ever use this ruling as a precedent for some other ruling. This is only to ensure the ascension of the Bush-Cheney crime spree. So, this ruling can only be used this time. Well, apparently Joe Miller, the Republican teabag freak bastard up in Alaska, didn't get the memo on that. He has filed suit in federal court against the Alaska Division of Elections. And his suit basically says that in counting the write-in votes for Lisa Murkowski, the real Republican up there, that the vote counting, it should be thrown out, because the suit challenges the rules on a number of grounds. The main argument is that only a correctly spelled ballot, as opposed to a looser standard of voter intent, only a correctly spelled ballot, Murkowski, should be used to judge whether or not a ballot should be accepted. And Miller's campaign also makes the claim that misspelled Murkowski ballots should in fact be interpreted not as votes for Murkowski, but as protest votes against her. Oh, Jesus Christ. You see what the teabaggers have in store? Do you understand? This Shimkus freak, cap and trade is bad because Noah was told by God, and this Joe Miller insane Nazi is saying, well, if Lisa Murkowski's name is spelled wrong, they weren't really voting for her, they were voting against her. Josh Marshall at Talking Points Memo quotes from the lawsuit filed by the Nazi. Here's what it says. The new policy makes no provisions for the many voters who cast protest votes. Prior to the election, people commented on radio stations and in the comment sections in blogs and newspaper stories that they would deliberately incorrectly write in a variation of Murkowski as a protest. They did so knowing that Murkowski was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a spelling bee campaign, replete with wristbands, pencils, and tattoos, all to educate the voters on proper spelling. Why was this done? Because even Murkowski had read the law and knew that it required proper spelling. So protest voters were trying to send a message to the candidate. The state has failed to create any guideline or standard that would account for the intent of the voter who intentionally cast a protest vote. That's from the Nazis' lawsuit. Joshua Marshall finds this argument pretty laughable, and at least from a legal standpoint, it would seem unlikely to hold water. Elections law expert Rick Hasen thinks that Miller's camp does have a few good arguments it could make, the most promising being a due process claim that argues the candidate's rights were violated by a change in election rules in the middle of the election. Oh! But here's the thing, Mr. Joe Miller Nazi, you right-wing fascist, you. Here's the deal. You didn't get enough votes! And you're trying to do what George Bush did. You're trying to model yourself on the little toy fascist when most of America knows at this point, Joe, that you're the real deal. You're the real deal. You praise the methods of the East German secret police. You are the real deal, Joe. So why don't you come up with something original? Why are you borrowing from poor old dope, drug, alcohol-addled George W. Bush? What a bunch of freaks. These people, this is what our political system has degenerated to, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling on September 12th or September 8th, whenever, I think it was the 12th, 2000. Here we are, where you have a self-described Nazi declaring that people who misspelled Murkowski's name in the write-in section were registering a protest vote. If they wanted to protest, Joe, why didn't they just vote for you? Oh. That would be too simple, wouldn't it? And plus the fact that Joe Miller thinks that the average voter in Alaska is dumber than whale blubber. Right, Joe? Right? Good God, what has happened? Stick around. We have more fun and frivolity right after the break.